I have a bit of a hot take. I think that 1.5 squeeze anamorphics are the best anamorphics. If you're already freaking out, bear with me for a second. I have tested a lot of anamorphic lenses in the past year, and I just got to test out the brand new Sirui Iron Star 1.5 squeeze full frame T19 anamorphic lenses. These just launched on Kickstarter, and right now you can get them for $1,000 a lens, which is pretty unreal. After like the pre-sale, whatever, it's gonna be $1,200 a lens, and then $3,500 for the full set of 3 lenses. Right now they have a 35mm, a 45mm, and a 60mm. And I've tested so many anamorphic lenses from so many different companies. Here is my advice. Before you buy an anamorphic lens, just listen to this. So first off, a lot of people, when they hear anamorphic, they just think about flares. And I think that's like the last thing I'm thinking about. To me, the biggest difference is how wide of a field of view you can get while keeping a nice cinematic look at the same time. So if you don't understand how anamorphics work, I don't either, but there is a massive difference between a 1.33 squeeze, a 1.5 squeeze, and a 2x squeeze. So what is happening is, for example, we have the 60mm on here right now. So a 60mm 1.5x squeeze anamorphic will, top to bottom, it'll look like a 60mm, like a spherical 60mm lens. Cool, normal. But width-wise, it's actually a 40mm because you take 60mm and divide it by 1.5. So we get the width of a 40mm, great, but then we get the height of a 60mm and the characteristics of a 60mm with the compression or whatever you want to call that. People are gonna freak out right now as soon as I said compression. If this was a 1.3 times squeeze, then it would be the width of a 45mm. And if this was a 2x squeeze, then it would be the width of a 30mm, which is insane. A 30mm width, but then 60mm height. That's like incredible, that look. So obviously then you're like, well, what are you talking about? 2x squeeze is the best, obviously. And yes, you do get the coolest look on a 2x squeeze anamorphic, for sure. Without a doubt, that is really hard to argue. Personal preference, sure, but no, 2x is the coolest look. But there's a big problem. So 1.33 times squeeze anamorphics, I just don't think that they look that anamorphic. You don't get that much of the look, and so it's kind of pointless. You're dealing with a lot of the headaches of anamorphic lenses, and you're just not getting that much benefit, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of 1.33 squeeze. I will say this 1.33x anamorphic lens is pretty interesting because it's autofocus, and I don't know of other full frame autofocus anamorphic lenses. There are very few. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is the pincushion distortion. It's quite strong, but this lens is interesting, but the squeeze just, it's not anamorphic enough. 2x, like we talked about, incredible, except it only really works on a camera that can shoot open gate. How many cameras can shoot open gate 4x3 right now?
Several camera models can shoot in open gate 4x3 mode. The Panasonic GH6 and Fujifilm X-H2S are among them. Additionally, the Blackmagic Ursa series offers open gate recording.
What else?
In addition to those cameras, the Arri Alexa cameras also offer open gate recording. So there's definitely a nice selection out there.
That's not a lot of cameras that can do open 4x3, or I guess some of the Alexas are 3x2 or whatever. But if you can't do 4x3 and you have a 16:9 sensor, you get this tiny sliver of an aspect ratio that's just not that usable. And yes, you could then crop in on that, but then you're missing out on so much of the benefits of a 2x anamorphic. For me, it kind of defeats the purpose at that point. But 1.5x, I think, is like the sweet spot. You get a lot more characteristics of anamorphic lenses than the 1.3x anamorphic lenses, but you don't have a tiny sliver of an aspect ratio if you're shooting on a 16:9 sensor. Yeah, you might need to crop in a tiny bit if that's not the aspect ratio that you want. And then if you do put it on like a 4x3 open gate sensor, then you get a nice 2:1 aspect ratio, which is actually very usable, a lot more versatile, I think, nowadays than the 2x squeeze on a 4x3, especially if it's gonna go on YouTube or something like that. Then 2:1 is actually really, really nice because that's the aspect ratio of a phone. And you can do something quite interesting with 1.5x anamorphic lenses, and that is just rotating it 90 degrees. Now you get this interesting like 4x3-ish aspect ratio. The bokeh is different now, it's going horizontal. It's just a really interesting look. And I actually have a theory that this like next generation of filmmakers will consider a 4x3 or some version of that aspect ratio more cinematic than the widescreen aspect ratios that I'm used to, and a lot of us that are a little bit older are used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I want to make a whole video on that. But this technique is something that I want to play around with because it's a really, really cool, unique, interesting look. And for those reasons, I think most people should be looking at 1.5x anamorphic lenses, like these Iron Star lenses, which by the way are really, really nice. I've been testing them for like about a week or so now. They aren't tiny, but they're also not massive, and they don't weigh a ton, so these are perfect for handheld or gimbal work. They're nice and sharp in the center, and then kind of towards the edges, the sharpness starts to roll off smoothly. I really like that kind of look. And to me, they look pretty like modern, but not that like cheap, sharp, modern look that sometimes we get with these more affordable lenses. The look isn't crazy, like the anamorphics are pretty subtle, and I actually prefer that. Some people prefer a really strong flare, but I don't want random flares coming in all the time. I want nice organic flares that appear when you want them to appear, but then you're not having to fight them all the time, that they're just like showing up everywhere. And you can get these in neutral or blue flares. I had the neutral version. I prefer neutral. The focus breathing is actually pretty decent, which is really nice. Are these as good as something like the Atlas Mercury 1.5x squeeze? No, but this also costs like, what is it, $8,000 for this versus $1,000 for this. So like this is a different class. This is, you know, a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford these. Also, interestingly, these are smaller than Mercury's, but they weigh more. In the end, I think we all have personal preferences, and you have to kind of look at the footage that you see. And that's what I'm always trying to do, is give you the most footage to look at to kind of make your decisions on what gear you're trying to buy. Everyone is so different. Everybody sees things differently. But this is a very affordable 1.5x anamorphic lens. The next lenses in this series are going to be a 75mm, 100mm, and a 135mm, I believe. And then they're also going to make a wider focal length. I'm not sure exactly what focal length that's going to be. I really love those wider ones, so I can't wait for that. And this was my setup. I'll just quickly, this is actually a little bit of an interesting setup, I think at least. So essentially I have an FX3 here, and this is like a Tilda rig here, a little cage for it. Then we have a PL adapter, then the Iron Star lenses, and then I'm using a Tilda Mapbox ND system here. And then I have the DJI Focus Pro. So I actually have autofocus for this anamorphic lens, which is quite luxurious. It's really nice when you're just like by yourself gunning basically. I like all that footage of the music stuff, the bands. that was from this beach jazz festival. I just walked around, filmed things kind of dock style. Wanted to see how it would work kind of using it dock style. And this was really, really fun. The setup isn't too heavy. And then maybe the most interesting piece is I'm using my iPhone to monitor, and iPhones are actually incredible as monitors because they have a built-in battery. They're super easy to just plug in, and they don't take up a lot of space. You're not adding a lot of weight because you don't need to use V-mount batteries and all that stuff. I'm using the Monitor Plus app. If you haven't tried an iPhone as your monitor, I do recommend it. The LiDAR didn't go quite straight, but I think it still worked fine. This is not a review of the IronStar lenses. This video is actually sponsored by Surrey. You guys had some questions on Instagram about the IronStar, so I'm gonna answer some of those. Alex Finger asked, curious about the weight. I use my RS4 for a lot of work I do, and they are about 2.2 pounds, so I think they would work quite well on the RS4 actually. Zach Noyle, wow, the build looks solid too. If you guys don't know, Zach Noyle is like incredible. One of the best like surf filmmaker photographers. Stefan asked what the close focus is. So on the 60mm, the close focus is 78 centimeters. On the 45, it's 65 centimeters. And on 35, same thing, 65 centimeters. So not the closest, but still pretty good. Pin cushion or barrel distortion. So these are actually interesting anamorphics because I found them to have very little distortion, but there is a tiny bit of pin cushion distortion on the edges, especially on the 35. I feel like I don't really notice it at all on the 45 or 60mm, but overall, these are very like non-distorted anamorphic lenses. And I think that's partly why these look very like modern to me. They don't look like, oh, these are like vintage anamorphic lenses, if that makes sense. Christian asked, what are the flares like? Here you go, you can see them. I found the flares to be very minimal, you're not getting them all the time. Like any bright thing is not gonna throw a crazy flare over the whole image. So I think that's actually really nice. I personally don't want flares all the time, but then obviously if you're pointing it at the sun, it's cool to get some nice flares. And then there's a lot of questions just about anamorphic lenses in general. I hope I have already answered some of those. Yeah, anamorphics can be a little confusing, but I think the most confusing thing is that whole like vertical focal length versus width-wise, it's a different, but I hope you kind of understand what I'm talking about now. So if you are in the market for anamorphic lenses, I highly recommend getting a 1.5x squeeze anamorphic. Is it the absolute best look? No, but it is the most versatile and most functional, I think, for most people. Unless all of your main cameras are 4x3, you can shoot open gate, then go for the craziest look. Obviously, sometimes that look is too much depending on the project, but I think for most people, 1.5x squeeze anamorphics are the way to go. I'm telling you, sometimes it's very tempting to get the Lambo, but actually you need like a really solid Tesla. Did I just make a lot of people mad? I think a lot of times with gear, we have this like idea of like, oh, I want this thing, it's gonna be incredible, and then we don't fully think it through, and all the headaches and like, oh, this just doesn't work at all for me. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid for you, because I have tested a lot of different anamorphic lenses, and I do think that 1.5 is the perfect happy medium of a great look, super versatile, and yeah, you just got a lot of cool things like that 90-degree 4x3 aspect ratio. You gotta try that out. It's very interesting. All right, that's it for me. Check out the IronStar Kickstarter is out right now. I think you guys will like them. 1.5 is the best. Fight me in the comments. All right, bye guys.